I built everything you are about to hear with my own two hands. The penthouse. The hotels. The commercial properties. The entire financial architecture of a life that other people lived inside without ever once stopping to ask who made the walls or who kept the lights on. I built all of it. And then I sat at my own dinner table, in my own home, and listened to my stepdaughter tell me that the best thing I could do for her wedding, for the version of her life that I was actively funding, was not show up. She said it calmly. No raised voice. No apology. Just clear, measured, final. And I want you to know what I said back. I said, of course. I understand. I didn't say it because I agreed. I said it because in that exact moment, sitting at my own table in my own home, something that had been wound very tight inside me for a very long time finally loosened by one precise degree. Because I did understand. I understood everything, suddenly and completely, with the kind of clarity you only get when someone removes all ambiguity for you. She didn't want me at the wedding. Her father didn't push back. The family she wanted me to fund didn't consider me family. And now that I saw it plainly, without the comfortable fog of hope, without the softening effect of years of habit and loyalty, I knew exactly what I was going to do. My name is Imani Brooks. I am 47 years old. I own 3 boutique hotels, a commercial real estate portfolio that my accountant once described as breathtaking, and a development subsidiary responsible for acquiring and rehabilitating historic properties across the Southeast. I built all of it myself. And this is the story of how I almost lost myself inside it, and what I did when I finally saw clearly enough to stop. If you are new here, welcome. Hit subscribe right now and drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from. I read every single one of them, and this community is everything. Now let me take you back to where this really began. I did not grow up with money. I want to be honest about that from the start, because when people encounter the penthouse and the portfolio and the hotels, they tend to assume there was a head start somewhere. There wasn't. There was a walk-up apartment in Baltimore, a kitchen table with a broken leg propped up by a real estate licensing textbook, and a mother who worked 6 days a week as a home health aide and said 3 things to me so many times they became the foundation of everything I ever built. God is faithful, she said. Nothing comes easy, she said. And, don't let anyone hold your future in their hands but you. I studied at that broken table until 2 in the morning for 2 years, after full shifts at the front desk of a mid-range hotel chain. I passed my licensing exam on the first try. I got 2 investment properties in Atlanta's West End by 35. I flipped 4 residential units and moved into commercial real estate by 38, a retail strip in Buckhead, a mixed-use building in Midtown, and a warehouse near the airport I converted into flex office space. By 41, brokers in Atlanta knew my name. Not because I was the loudest. Because I was the most prepared. I never walked into a room without having studied every angle of what I was about to walk into. I never closed a deal I didn't fully understand. I never let anyone out-prepare me, because preparation was one of the only things I had complete control over. And then, at 43, I bought the hotel. It was a waterfront property in Savannah that the previous owners had driven into the ground through a combination of neglect and spectacular management failures. The reviews online were genuinely frightening. There was mold. There were structural issues I prefer not to describe in detail. Brokers who looked at that building saw a disaster they didn't want to touch. When I walked through it for the first time, I saw something else entirely. I saw the bones. The architecture, historic, original, unrepeatable. The location on the river. The light that came through those windows in the morning at an angle that made the whole space feel like somewhere the world hadn't yet discovered. I looked at that broken building and I saw what it was going to become. I bought it for 60% of assessed value. I rebuilt it over 18 months with a team I assembled and managed myself, every contractor sourced, every decision reviewed, every detail controlled. I opened the Breland Hotel to the kind of industry response that made my accountant, the most understated man I know, a man who communicates almost exclusively in flat declarative sentences, send me an email with 3 exclamation points. That was the year I met Derrick Cole. He was at a charity gala in Atlanta. I remember walking into that room. I walk into rooms a certain way, always have. My mother called it the walk of a woman who has already decided she belongs there, and a man near the bar turned to look at me. Not the way men sometimes look at women at these events, as an assessment, a calculation. He looked at me the way someone looks at a person they find genuinely compelling. Like I was worth paying attention to. He said, "You just walked into this room like you own it." I said, "That's just how I walk." And he laughed. A full, warm, real laugh. The kind that comes from somewhere genuine rather than somewhere practiced. And we talked for 2 hours. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He remembered details I mentioned early in the conversation and brought them back later. He was curious about my work in a way that felt like real curiosity rather than social performance. He made me feel, for the first time in a very long time, after years of being the most capable person in rooms full of people who admired my results without particularly caring about me, he made me feel seen. Not impressive. Seen. Do you understand the difference? Because I had been impressive for years. Being impressive means people acknowledge your output. Being seen means someone cares about the person doing the work. I had almost forgotten that second thing existed. I found out soon after that he had a daughter, Jada, 23 at the time, and that he was in between ventures, as he described it, in the easy manner of a man who expected the right opportunity to arrive at its own pace. I chose to find this quality charming rather than concerning. I married him 14 months later on the rooftop of my hotel in Savannah, at sunset, with a small gathering of people I loved. And I want to say this clearly, because I think it matters to the whole story. I was genuinely, completely, without reservation in love with that man. I went into that marriage with my whole heart. Whatever came after, the beginning was real and I do not regret the beginning. But I have to be honest about what I learned in the years that followed. Derrick was not cruel. I want to repeat that because I think it's important. Cruel men are actually easier in some ways. You see them, you name them, you make a clean decision and you leave. The difficult thing about Derrick was that he was comfortable. He was comfortable in the way certain people become comfortable inside a life that someone else has built, without ever registering the architecture of it or the person who erected it. He stopped looking for the deal after about 18 months. He attended events as my husband. He played golf 3 days a week. He was warm and charming and funny at dinner parties and completely, genuinely incapable of sustaining effort toward anything that required more than initial enthusiasm. The deal, he always said. Just waiting on the right deal. I believed in the deal for 3 years. Then I believed in Derrick, in the potential I saw in him, in the man I knew was in there somewhere beneath the comfort and the charm. After that, I simply continued. Not from belief. From habit. From the particular kind of love that becomes so threaded into the routine of daily life that you can no longer easily distinguish it from obligation. Covering things was as natural to me as breathing. I was covering his lifestyle, the golf club membership, the wardrobe, the lunches I wasn't invited to. I was covering Jada's car insurance, her quarterly credit card bills, the BMW lease that had somehow become my responsibility through a series of conversations I could no longer fully reconstruct. I was covering everything. And I was not asking for acknowledgement. This is the part one have to be honest about, because it would be easy to tell this story as though I was purely victimized and never complicit. But I was complicit. I had told myself, somewhere in the second year, that needing to be thanked was a lesser kind of love, that a mature woman, a successful woman, a woman operating at the level I operated at should be past requiring external validation. I had restructured my own expectations so completely that I had convinced myself I was giving from abundance and asking nothing in return, and that this was a virtue. It was not a virtue. It was starvation with a story attached to it that made it feel like something else. Now let me tell you about Jada. Jada was 23 when her father and I married. By 26 she was engaged to Ethan Whitmore, old Atlanta money, very elegant, very traditional, as I would hear repeated with increasing frequency, and she was living a life that looked effortless because it was effortless. Designer clothes. A leased BMW. Vacations she documented in meticulous detail online, presenting a lifestyle curated to look like it had simply always been there. In her social media posts, I appeared in the background sometimes. Slightly out of frame. She tagged her father when she posted about family. I attended her birthday dinners. I covered the bills. I told myself I was building a relationship that would eventually bloom into something real. I told myself I was planting seeds and that patience was love and that one day she would look at me and truly see me. I was watering a garden I was never going to be permitted to sit in. The Whitmore family dinner at my penthouse was an education in what was actually happening around me, delivered through the medium of a single evening. Linda Whitmore is the kind of woman who can communicate an entire social verdict through the calibration of a smile. She stood in my foyer, which I had renovated myself, the tile I had selected from samples, the console table I had sourced from a dealer in New Orleans, and she looked around slowly. Not the way someone looks at a home they are appreciating. The way someone assesses a property for value. "What a lovely space," she said. "Thank you," I said. "I designed most of it myself." A small pause. Her smile remained precisely in place. Then she turned to Derrick. "You must be so proud of her," she said. Not to me. Not, "You must be proud of yourself, Imani, what a thing you have built." To him. As though his pride in my work was the point. As though the relevant achievement was that he had found a woman capable of building this, rather than that I had built it. Derrick put his arm around me. "Every single day," he said. I smiled. Because that is what I did at those dinners. Caleb Whitmore shook my hand briefly and then shook Derrick's hand for longer and pulled him immediately into a conversation about a golf club I had never heard of and was not going to be invited to join. Ethan asked me what I did, and when I explained, the commercial properties, the hotel chain, the development subsidiary, the recent Savannah acquisition, he said, "Impressive," and returned his attention to Jada with the finality of a man filing information under not particularly relevant. And Jada. Jada moved through my penthouse all evening as though she were the host. Directing my caterer. Rearranging my centerpiece because she preferred the other configuration. Suggesting where the guests should sit as though the seating were hers to arrange. Not maliciously. That's what I kept coming back to. Not maliciously. She had simply absorbed the space as hers so naturally, over so many visits, that the boundary between what belonged to her and what belonged to me had completely dissolved in her mind. And then the deposit. "The Hargrove estate," Jada announced, with the satisfaction of someone playing a card they've been saving. "Outside the city. Beautiful grounds. Very classic. Very traditional." She looked at Linda. Linda's entire demeanor warmed like a room when someone finally opens the right window. "The venue deposit is $75,000. We'll need it in the next 2 weeks to hold the date." Derrick looked at me. An expecting look. Not a requesting look. An expecting look. "We'll make it work," he said. "We." That word. As though we were partners. As though he had built or earned or contributed a single piece of the financial architecture he was drawing from without acknowledgement. I looked at him. I looked at Jada. I looked at the Whitmores and their elegance, eating food prepared by my caterer, drinking wine from my cellar, sitting in chairs I had purchased and arranged, in a building I owned outright and paid for alone. Of course, I said. I'll handle the deposit. And not one person at that table said thank you. I want to say that again so it lands properly. $75,000, committed in a single sentence, by a woman who had been told she was not welcome at the event the money was paying for, and not one person paused long enough to say thank you. Because they didn't think of it as generosity. They thought of it as my function. As what I was for. I had been so consistent and so quiet in my provision that I had become, in their minds, infrastructure. And nobody thanks infrastructure. You simply expect it to function. Let me tell you about the 2 weeks between that lawyer meeting and the morning of the wedding, because people always ask, how did you do it? How did you sit across from those people every day and not say anything? How did you smile at the planning meetings and answer Jada's calls and watch Derrick live inside the life you were quietly dismantling? My answer is always the same. I had spent 11 years learning how to manage my face at dinner tables. 2 more weeks was nothing. But it cost something. I want to be honest about that too. There was a night, maybe 5 days into the process, where I sat on the bathroom floor of my penthouse at 11 at night and I had a conversation with myself that I will describe simply as the moment I understood the full weight of what I had been carrying. Not the money. Not the resources. The weight of being unseen. The weight of being in a room where everything beautiful came from your decisions and your sacrifice, and having everyone in that room look past you as though you were one of the fixtures. I am not a crier. My mother was not a crier. She believed emotion needed somewhere to go, that it served you best when converted into action. I inherited this. But that night I let myself feel it. All of it. The years of it. The patience that had calcified into something closer to numbness. The love replaced by the habit of love. The hunger for being known as a person rather than a provider. I sat with that for a while. Then I got up. Washed my face. Went to bed. The next morning I was at my desk by 5:15 reviewing Greystone documentation. Because that is what I do. I feel what needs to be felt, and then I work. There was also a conversation I had about a week before the wedding with a woman named Grace who manages 2 of my commercial properties. 61 years old. 30 years in Atlanta real estate. The quality of someone who has seen most of the ways people mismanage their relationships and doesn't pretend otherwise. We had lunch. I told her enough. She listened with the unhurried focus of someone who thinks while she eats. When I finished, she put her fork down. When did you stop expecting to be thanked? She asked. Sometime in the 2nd year, I said. I stopped waiting and I told myself that was maturity. Was it maturity? I was quiet for a moment. I think now it was protection. I was protecting myself from the information that the gratitude wasn't coming. She nodded. Here's what 30 years has taught me, she said. The women who stop expecting to be thanked are usually the ones who figured out very early that expecting things from certain people costs more energy than doing without. So they adjust their expectations all the way down. They make the relationship livable by removing the requirement for reciprocity. She picked up her fork again. Which is a kind of love. But it eats from the inside. It is not sustainable. Yes, I said. So do what you're doing, she said. I paid for lunch. I drove back through Atlanta with the windows of my car cracked and something I couldn't name settling behind my breastbone. A quality of rightness. Not triumph. Not even relief. Just the particular satisfaction of a decision made in full clarity by a person who has finally, stopped lying to herself. The morning I drove to Savannah, I packed cleanly and without ceremony. I took the photograph of my mother from my desk. She is standing in front of our Baltimore apartment, squinting into the sun, hands on her hips, tired but not defeated. I have carried that photograph to every significant place I have ever worked. I took the wooden carving I bought at a market in Ghana on a trip I made alone before Derrick, when I was someone who took trips alone without needing to consult anyone's calendar or preferences or feelings about international travel. I put these things in my bag. I looked at the penthouse one last time, the herringbone floors, the chandelier I had sourced from Brussels, the kitchen I had designed from a sample board on a quiet Saturday 3 years ago. Beautiful. Mine. Done. I closed the door. I did not look back. I drove south through the Georgia morning with the windows down and something good on the radio, and I felt what I can only describe as the sensation of moving forward. Not running. Advancing. In the direction I had chosen. At the pace I had set. With the resources I had built. The only way I have ever known how to move. Here is something I think about often now. The moment I understood what had actually been happening was not the dinner table. It was not when Jada said best thing you can do is not come. It was 2 weeks earlier, at a dinner party, not at my home, at someone else's, a couple Derrick had known for years, where Derrick spent 45 minutes telling a story about a business trip I had taken to Savannah for the hotel opening. He told it well, I will give him that. He described the renovation, the waterfront location, the response from the press. He talked about the opening party. He talked about the speech. He talked about the food and the wine and the guests. And the entire time, he said we renovated it. We opened in spring. We had the most extraordinary response. I sat across the table and watched the people listening to him, nodding, impressed, asking follow-up questions directed at him, and I understood something that I had been almost understanding for years but had not yet allowed myself to see fully. He was not lying, exactly. He was not deliberately taking credit. He had simply lived inside my success for so long that the boundary between his life and mine had dissolved in his own perception, the way the boundary between Jada's ownership and mine had dissolved in hers. They had both been so thoroughly inside the world I built that they could no longer identify where it ended and they began. That is not malice. That is something almost sadder than malice. That is what happens when a generous person becomes so reliably present that their presence stops registering as a gift and starts registering as a condition of the environment. I had become a condition of their environment. And environments don't get thanked. I want to tell you about a phone call I had with my friend Renata about a month after everything happened. Renata has been my friend since our 20s, back in Baltimore, and she is one of the 2 or 3 people in the world who has always told me the truth without requiring me to fail first. She called to check on me. She had heard the outline of things from a mutual friend, and we talked for almost 2 hours. At some point she said, I want to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. Go ahead, I said. I said something to you on your 2nd anniversary that you didn't hear. I said it again at your 3rd. I said it in different ways for the next several years and you nodded and changed the subject every time. What did you say? I asked, though I thought I might already know. I said that Derrick was living in your house without knowing it was your house, she said. And I said that eventually the house was going to have to tell him. I was quiet for a moment. I heard you, I said finally. I just wasn't ready to do anything about it. I know, she said. That's why I kept saying it. That conversation, that quality of being known by someone who had been watching and waiting and telling the truth even when I wasn't ready to receive it, was one of the most important things that happened in those months. Not the separation. Not the gold box. Not the legal documents. The phone call with Renata, where I was finally ready to hear what she had been saying for years. That is what I mean when I say I had been confusing provision with love. I had been providing for Derrick and Jada and covering their lives in every material sense, but I had been keeping the people who actually loved me, who actually knew me, at a slight distance. Because being known requires openness, and openness requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is difficult for a woman who learned early that the safest thing is to be the one holding things together rather than the one being held. I had been holding everything together for a very long time. I was ready, finally, to put it down and figure out what I actually wanted to be held. In the months after the separation, I called Renata and Dee more. I said yes to things I had previously declined because I was too busy managing a life I should have been exiting years earlier. I went to a gallery opening in Atlanta and bought a piece I loved for no reason other than that I loved it, without thinking about where it would go or whether it would photograph well in a background behind someone else's social media post. I booked the Lisbon trip. I stood at that rooftop table in Lisbon, watching the Tagus River, and I understood something I want to pass on to you. The version of me who sat at the broken kitchen table in Baltimore, propping up the leg with a textbook and studying until 2 a.m, she was not building a life to give away. She was building a life to inhabit. She was building it brick by brick because she believed, with the stubbornness of someone who has no alternative to belief, that the life would be worth inhabiting once she got there. She was right. It just took me a few extra years to find my way back to it. I also need to tell you about the morning after the wedding that didn't happen, because the story doesn't end with me sitting on a terrace watching a river. There is an afterward, and the afterward matters. About 3 weeks after everything, I got a message from Jada. Not a call. A message. Which I think tells you something about where things were. It was long, longer than anything she had ever sent me before, and it was not what I expected. She did not ask me to reverse any of it. She did not argue or negotiate or demand. She said, in the halting way of someone who is trying to say something true for the first time and does not quite have the vocabulary for it yet, that she had been thinking about the years we had known each other. That she had always told herself the distance between us was just a personality difference, just the normal complexity of blended families, just the way things were. That she had never let herself examine what was underneath that story. That she was examining it now and she did not particularly like what she was finding. She said, I think I let myself be ungrateful because it was easier than being grateful. Because being grateful would have meant acknowledging what you were doing, and acknowledging what you were doing would have meant acknowledging what I was taking, and I didn't want to know that about myself. I read that message 3 times. I did not reply immediately. I sat with it for a week. I thought about what Jada's acknowledgement meant to me, which was less than I would have expected before the separation, because I had stopped needing their acknowledgement to know my own worth. I had already given myself the acknowledgement I needed, on a legal pad, in my home office, in the middle of the night. I had already named the truth of my own life to myself. What Jada was offering was real and it was something, but it was no longer the thing I was hungry for. I was no longer hungry in that direction. I replied briefly. I told her I appreciated the honesty. I told her I hoped she built something real and true with Ethan, without a financial infrastructure she hadn't examined underneath it. I wished her well. And I meant it. All of it. I have not spoken to her since, and I hold no bitterness about that. Some chapters close cleanly. Some relationships have a natural end that has nothing to do with hostility or pain, they simply run their course and the energy that sustained them finds a better use somewhere else. I had better uses for my energy. She was finding her footing without mine beneath it. That seemed like the right outcome for both of us. What I kept, from all of it, was clarity. I kept the understanding of what I had done wrong, not in the legal or the financial sense, but in the personal sense. The wrong of minimizing myself. The wrong of confusing patience with permission. The wrong of building a life I was simultaneously funding and being excluded from, and telling myself that was love. And I kept the understanding of what I had done right, which was to see it, name it, and act. I kept my mother's photograph, which goes with me everywhere. And I kept the Ghanaian painting, which hangs in the lobby of the Savannah Hotel now, where guests stop in front of it every day and ask about it. I tell them the story of the artist. I tell them where I found it. I tell them it cost $12,000 and I loved it the moment I saw it and I will love it until I stop being a person who can see things. It belongs where it belongs. In a space I built. In the light it deserves. I am going to tell you one more thing, and then I want to hear from you. People sometimes ask me if I regret how I did it. Not whether I should have done it. Most people, when they hear the full story, understand why. They ask about the method. The gold box. The empty penthouse. The wedding morning. They ask whether I could have been less dramatic is the word some people use. Less theatrical. Less final. And I always say the same thing, no. Not because I wanted to make a statement. Not because I wanted to cause pain or manufacture a moment. I did it the way I did it because it was the only method that would produce an outcome that was real rather than managed. If I had sat Derrick down and said I am leaving and here is why, he would have deployed the charm. He would have been warm and remorseful and full of language about change and growth and everything being different from now on. And I would have sat there in the warmth of that language and I would have considered it. Because that is who I am. I respond to warmth. I believe in people's capacity to become what they promise to become. It is one of my best qualities and it is the quality that had kept me in that marriage for 4 years longer than I should have stayed. The only way to make a clean break with a person whose primary skill is making unclean breaks feel unnecessary was to make the break complete before the conversation began. To let the empty penthouse be the conversation. To let the gold box be the statement. To be gone before there was any warmth to sit in. Was it painful for them? Yes. I know it was. And I am not going to perform guilt about that. Because pain is sometimes the appropriate response to a reality you have been avoiding, and if walking into an empty apartment on your wedding morning is what it takes for certain people to finally see what was actually holding their lives together, then perhaps that was exactly the lesson that needed to be learned. I did not ruin their lives. Their lives are continuing. Derrick has an apartment. Jada has a marriage. Ethan and his family have their clarity. Linda Whitmore called me once, about 2 months after everything, and I did not answer and she did not call again. The Whitmores, whatever their limitations, are pragmatic people. They understand the shape of a situation quickly. Everyone is fine. And I am better than fine. I am running 3 hotels and a commercial portfolio and I am 51 days from closing the Asheville acquisition and I am going to Lisbon in October and I call Renata on Thursdays and I bought a new painting for my office in Savannah, a younger artist this time, someone I found at an outdoor market whose work made me stop in the middle of a crowd and look at it for a long time, which is always how I know. I have both hands free. And I know exactly what I am building next. The last thing. Because I want to leave you with this. My mother died 8 years ago. She was 69 and she had worked every day of her adult life and she died with the specific dignity of a woman who had never compromised on the things that mattered to her and had made peace with everything else. At her funeral, one of the women she had cared for, one of her patients, an elderly woman named Mrs. Calloway, came and found me in the receiving line and took both of my hands and said, "Your mother used to talk about you all the time. She said you were going to build something real. She said you had the gift of seeing things clearly." I think about that every time I walk into a building I am about to acquire. Every time I stand in a space that looks like damage to everyone else and I see what it could become. My mother gave me that. The ability to look at something broken and see the structure beneath the surface. To believe in the bones when the surface is failing. I used that gift on buildings. I used it on hotels. I should have used it earlier on my marriage, not to save it, but to see it clearly. To see the bones of it and assess honestly whether what I was seeing was genuine structure or just what I wanted to see. I see clearly now. And what I see, when I look at my life from where I am standing today, is a woman who is exactly where she is supposed to be, doing exactly what she was made to do, with both hands free and the next chapter completely open. I cannot wait to build it. That night I sat alone in my home office with a legal pad and I wrote the truth of my life without softening a single syllable. I own the penthouse. Outright. Derrick's name is on nothing. I own the commercial properties through my LLC. He has no stake. I own the Breland Hotel and its sister properties through my development subsidiary. He attended the opening party and made a charming toast, and that is the sum total of his relationship to the business I built from a condemned building. I have been covering his lifestyle for 4 years. I have been covering Jada's expenses for 3. I have just committed $75,000 to a wedding I have been explicitly told not to attend. I read the list. I looked at the facts plain on the page. Then I picked up my phone and I texted Marcus Lawson, my attorney of 11 years. Available tomorrow morning? He replied in 4 minutes. He's always fast. I pay for that. 7:30? 7:30, I confirmed. I locked the legal pad in my desk drawer. I went to bed. And here is the thing I want you to notice, I fell asleep in under 20 minutes. Because when you have been carrying a weight for a very long time and you finally make the decision to put it down, even just deciding is a kind of rest. Marcus Lawson arrived at 7:28 the next morning with his leather portfolio and his own coffee. He is 53 and meticulous to the point of artistry, and he has one quality I prize above everything else in a professional relationship: every word he uses is load-bearing. He doesn't waste language. Neither do I. It is the foundation of 11 excellent years together. I told him everything in 12 minutes. Flat. Factual. In order. When I finished, he looked up and asked me 2 words. What do you want? Those 2 words. Do you know how rarely someone asks you that? Not what you need to do, not what is expected of you, not what the situation requires, just, what do you want? I had not been asked that in a very long time. Complete financial separation, I said. Every account access removed. Every card closed. Every joint obligation dissolved. Done before the wedding. The marriage itself? I have a divorce attorney handling that separately. I want the financial piece first. I want his access gone before he understands what's happening. Lawson made his precise notes. Then he looked up. There's one more thing. I did some preliminary work this morning. The Hargrove estate, the wedding venue. Part of the Greystone Property Group, acquired 18 months ago by your hotel development subsidiary. I looked at him. I can have full documentation to you within the hour, he said. Please do, I said. I didn't smile. I'm not a woman who performs satisfaction. But something settled in me in that moment. Like the last piece of something large and carefully constructed finally finding where it was always meant to go. What followed was 2 weeks of appearing completely unchanged while changing everything underneath. I woke at 5 every morning. I ran my properties. I took Jada's wedding planning calls with the patient warmth of someone genuinely trying to help. I sat through a planning session with Cressida, the wedding coordinator, a woman who communicates entirely through adjectives and hand gestures, and offered one opinion that was received and not used. I appeared to every observer exactly as I always had, composed, functional, present. Lawson was moving fast beneath the surface. The supplemental credit card was deactivated on a Tuesday. I got a text from Derrick that afternoon. Weird thing with the card. Probably a glitch. I read it, set the phone face down, returned to my call. 3 days later, card still down. Can you call the bank? I drafted a reply. Deleted it. Said nothing. The household account moved to a solo account in my name. Every shared financial instrument was modified through the proper channels. Clean paper trail. No drama. No announcement. Just the quiet execution of decisions already made by a person who had made her decision and was not changing her mind. During this same period I was moving my personal things out of the penthouse. One afternoon while Derrick was at golf, I took down the Ghanaian painting in the hallway, $12,000, purchased at an Atlanta gallery opening, a piece I loved with a completeness that had nothing to do with what it cost, wrapped it in moving pads and drove it to my Savannah hotel. My mother's jewelry went to a safety deposit box. The art books I had collected for 20 years went to climate-controlled storage under my LLC. The photograph of my mother on my desk went into my overnight bag. I was taking back what was mine. Quietly. Without announcement. Precisely. Through Lawson, I confirmed my authority as the lessor of the Hargrove estate and invoked the property preservation approval clause I had built into every acquisition contract for 3 years. I instructed the venue manager, Sheila, who understood completely who owned the property and who did not, to hold all event approvals pending my direct authorization. Authorization I was not going to give. In the meantime, the cracks were showing. Derrick grew quiet. For a man whose natural mode is warmth and social ease and filling every available conversational space, quiet had texture. I heard him making calls from the next room in a voice calibrated between casual and escalating. One Tuesday evening he came to me with the full charm fully deployed, hand on my arm, voice lowered, the specific smile he used when he needed something. "Things feel off," he said. "The accounts. Something I can't get a clear picture on." "Year-end restructuring," I said. "Lawson's managing it. You know how it gets." He searched my face. He found nothing. "Keep me in the loop," he said. "Of course," I said. Then there was the confrontation about my study. Cressida wanted to use it as a bridal suite. "The light in there is perfect," she announced, standing in my doorway with the confidence of someone who has never been told no. "Just for 2 or 3 hours on the morning." "That's my workspace," I said. "Just the morning?" "No," I said. Pleasantly. Finally. After Cressida left, Jada stayed. She stood in my kitchen with her arms crossed and the particular expression she used when she considered me an obstacle rather than a person. "It's my wedding," she said. "One day. I have covered the deposit," I said. "I have hosted every planning meeting. I have been gracious throughout every part of this process. My study is the single limit I have asked for." "That is a very short list, Jada." She picked up her bag. "Fine," she said, and left without looking at me. I returned to the contract I had been reviewing. Marked 2 amendments. And sat for a moment in the silence of my kitchen, in my building, and felt one more degree of the thing loosening. One more degree toward the truth. One more degree toward what I was going to do. Then came the night I overheard them. I woke past midnight and went to get water. Jada had stayed over. She and Derrick were in the living room. They thought I was asleep. Their voices assumed the casual intimacy of people who believe they are not being heard. "She's going to be difficult about the study," Jada said. "Just let it go," Derrick said. "She'll come around. She never comes around on anything that actually matters to me. She always needs the last word." A pause. Then Derrick, quieter, "She's paying for the whole thing, Jada." "I know that. So maybe let her have the study." Then Jada's voice, slow and deliberate, the voice of someone who has thought about this and arrived at a conclusion. "Do you ever think she enjoys it? Holding the money over everything? It's her way of controlling things. She's not like us, Dad. She doesn't understand family the way we do. Everything for her is a transaction. Everything is about what she gets out of it. She doesn't understand family. Everything is a transaction." I stood in my kitchen in the dark, holding my glass of water, and I heard the story they had constructed about me in private. Not the story of a woman who had worked for 11 years to provide a beautiful life for a family that didn't particularly care about her. The story of a woman who used money to control. Who gave transactionally. Who did not understand the thing they called family. They had built this story because it was easier than the alternative. The alternative was acknowledging that I had given everything and received almost nothing, and that this was not a situation they wanted to examine because examining it would require them to account for themselves. I drank my water. I went back to bed. I lay in the dark for 15 minutes and then fell asleep, because there was nothing left to keep me awake. I had already made my decision 3 weeks ago. This was simply the last piece of evidence confirming it. I texted Lawson the next morning, final instruction on the Hargrove. He replied, Sheila will hold pending your authorization. I replied, I will not be giving authorization. One word back, confirmed. I packed my bag. I took the last things from the penthouse that mattered to me. I drove south to Savannah with the windows down and something good on the radio. I did not look back at the building. 2 days before the wedding, Tanya Cole, Derrick's sister, arrived with 2 large suitcases and the absolute certainty of someone who has never once questioned her welcome. She walked in, kissed her brother, nodded at me, and announced she would take the guest suite. That's my home office, I said. She stopped. Turned. Where else am I supposed to sleep? I drove 4 hours. I own a hotel nearby, I said, pleasantly. Very comfortable. I can arrange a rate. She looked at Derrick. She's serious? She is, he said. You're putting family in a hotel, Tanya said. A verdict, not a question. I'm offering a comfortable alternative, I said. Your choice entirely. Tanya did not go to the hotel. She took the couch and spent the evening making sure every wall of the apartment was aware of how she felt about me. Difficult. Doesn't understand family. Always has to have the last word. I put in my earbuds. I put on Coltrane. I fell asleep. I had a property review in Savannah. This was true. I walked every floor with my facility manager, approved the lobby refresh, tasted the new spring menu dishes, reviewed the occupancy numbers for the quarter. I was thorough and present, because I am always thorough and present, even when everything beneath my professional life is in the final stages of a quiet, complete rearrangement. In the evenings I sat on the terrace of my private suite and looked at the river. I had 37 unread messages by the night before the wedding. Jada. Derrick. Tanya. And 1 missed call from Linda Whitmore, which told me everything. The Whitmore family had sensed turbulence they couldn't yet name. The illusion was already destabilizing. I returned none of the calls. I ordered room service. I opened a bottle of wine I had been saving for an occasion worth celebrating and decided that this evening, the evening before I finally closed a door that should have been closed years earlier, was exactly that occasion. I watched the river until it went dark. Then I slept. On the morning of the wedding, Jada walked into a hollow space where a home used to be. She told me about it later, in a conversation I didn't expect to have, in a voice that was no longer performing anything. She said she came out of the bedroom at 6:20 still filming her wedding vlog, camera in hand, narrating the morning in the warm and practiced register of a woman on the best day of her life. And then she walked into the living room and stopped. The room was empty. Not rearranged. Empty. The furniture was gone. The rugs were gone. The art, including my Ghanaian painting, which she had wanted moved for the wedding, was gone. The shelves were bare. The kitchen counter held one thing, a single gold-wrapped box. Inside it was a property sale notice for the penthouse, sold the previous Monday, 30 days to transfer occupancy. A letter on Greystone Property Group letterhead, which she read 3 times before she understood what she was reading. My development subsidiary had owned the Hargrove estate for 18 months. I was the lessor. I had invoked the approval clause. The venue was unavailable that day. The financial separation documents certified by Lawson's firm. And a sealed envelope for her father. She called Ethan. He listened. When she finished there was silence, and then, quietly, she owns the venue. Yes, Jada said. She has owned it for 18 months. Yes. And you told her not to come. There was a silence that contained its own answer. I'm coming over, Ethan said. His voice had moved somewhere else. Derrick read his envelope. I was told he went very still, which was unusual for a man who filled space with presence. He came out of the bedroom holding the papers and said, to no one in particular, what is this? She's leaving, Dad, Jada said. She can't just. She owns all of it, Jada said. Her voice was quiet in a way I had never heard her voice be quiet before. The building. The venue. The hotel. All of it. It was always hers. Derrick sat down on the bare floor of the penthouse I had bought and designed and loved and was done with. He sat on my herringbone floors, the ones I had chosen from a sample board on a Saturday afternoon 3 years ago, and he read the same line of his separation papers over and over. Ethan arrived. He sat with Jada and asked her everything, the accounts, the car, the cards, the deposit, the building, and she answered each question in a voice that got quieter with each answer. When she finished, Ethan was still for a long moment. Then he said, you told the person who was paying for your entire life that she was not welcome at the event she was paying for. Ethan. I love you, he said. And I need time to understand what I am walking into. He left. The engagement ring stayed. Linda and Caleb Whitmore came. Linda took one look at the empty penthouse and said to Caleb, very quietly, we need to leave. And Caleb followed her without a word to anyone, because the Whitmores, whatever else they were, understood immediately what had happened and what it meant and had no interest in being present for the accounting. Tanya filled the silence with volume. Building management arrived at 11 with clipboards and move-out timelines. And somewhere in Savannah, I was finishing my lunch. I was sitting on the terrace of the hotel I had rescued from ruin, eating grilled fish, drinking a glass of wine, watching the river. 51 days to the finalization of the divorce. A meeting scheduled with the Charleston developer that I was genuinely looking forward to. A trip to Lisbon I had booked for myself, by myself, with the simple quiet pleasure of a person who no longer has to consult anyone else's preferences before making a reservation. At 2 in the afternoon, Derrick's name appeared on my phone. I watched the screen. I thought about the gala. The laugh. The look. 14 months of courtship and a sunset wedding on my rooftop. I thought about traditional. I thought about best thing you could do is not come. I thought about hearing my own name said in my own dark kitchen in a voice that had decided what I was and had found no need to ask me. I thought about my mother. Don't let anyone hold your future in their hands but you. The call went to voicemail. I blocked the number. I put the phone down. I watched the river. A pelican moved along the surface of the water with the slow, ancient patience of creatures that have always known what they are. I watched it until it rounded the bend and disappeared. I breathed. I was still. I was entirely, completely, uncomplicatedly myself. I want to tell you what I understand now that I did not understand then. For years I had told myself that what I needed from the people around me was acknowledgement. Recognition. To be seen. But sitting in Lisbon 6 months later, at a rooftop table, grilled fish, the Tagus River going gold in the evening light, I understood something quieter and more fundamental. What I had needed was not their acknowledgement. What I had needed was my own. I had needed to look at my own life with full honesty and say, this is what I built, this is what was taken, this is what I allowed, and this is what I am worth. To be a fair and clear witness to myself, without softening the parts that reflected poorly on my choices. I had built everything. I had given everything. And I had told myself that this was love and that love did not require return. But that was not love. That was a story I told myself to make starvation feel like virtue. The difference between generosity and self-erasure is not always visible from the inside. From inside, they feel similar. The warmth, the purpose, the rightness of giving. The difference only becomes legible when you ask yourself, honestly, without softening, what you are receiving in return. Not money. Not material things. The simpler currency of being known. Being thanked. Being included. Having someone look at the life around them and say out loud, "She built this. She deserves to be here." I had received so little of that. For so long. And I had called it maturity when I stopped expecting it. The separation was finalized cleanly 4 months later. Derrick received a fair settlement, fair by the precise letter, not generous, because generous had been my entire posture for 11 years and had not been met with the things I needed. He moved into an apartment in Midtown that was comfortable and modest and bore no resemblance to the world he had occupied at my expense. Jada and Ethan did eventually marry. 8 months later. Smaller, quieter. She posted about it without referencing the original date. I did not comment. I had unfollowed without hostility, the way you close a tab you no longer need open. The Breland Hotel won a regional hospitality award that spring. I accepted it on behalf of my team and went to dinner with my general manager and 2 friends I had known since Baltimore and laughed in a way I had not laughed in years. Free. Unmanaged. Real. And in Lisbon, at that rooftop table, with the river going gold and the city turning from daylight to evening, I made a quiet list of what comes next. The Asheville acquisition, a historic inn on a hill above the city with bones just like the Savannah property, that same quality of overlooked beauty that other people see as damage and I see as potential. A 4th Breland property. 3 weeks somewhere I have never been, alone, with a good book and no agenda. More calls to the friends in Baltimore who have always seen me clearly and whom I had been, I realized, keeping at a slight distance because being seen clearly requires an openness I had not fully been ready for. And one more thing on the list, the most important one, I was going to stop calling provision love. I was going to stop shrinking myself to maintain peace in spaces I had built and deserved to occupy completely. I was going to stop being the person who holds everything together for people who cannot be bothered to notice the hands doing the holding. I was 47 years old. I had built an empire from a broken kitchen table. And I had never been more ready to see what I would build next. If my story found the right person today, if any part of it sounds like your life, or your mother's life, or someone you love, please leave a comment. Tell me which moment hit hardest. Tell me what you recognized. Share this with someone who is holding too much for people who are not holding them back. Like this video if you believe I made the right call. And if you are not yet subscribed, do it now, because there are more stories and they are waiting and this community is exactly who they are for. I didn't ruin their lives. I simply stopped holding them together. And I have never once looked back.